The grand hall of the Galactic Council was silent, the tension hanging in the air. Representatives from the galaxy's most powerful species sat around a massive circular table, each one eagerly awaiting the next order of business. It was a rare meeting, one that would shape the future of the galaxy. Earth, a young but rapidly advancing species, had just made contact with several alien civilizations. Their technology had begun to evolve at an astonishing pace, and they had come to this meeting with high hopes. The humans had sent their best ambassador, Richard Howell, to speak on behalf of Earth. He had traveled from Earth aboard the finest diplomatic ship humanity had ever built, carrying hopes, dreams, and the will to prove to the galaxy that humans belonged among the stars. Ambassador Howell stood in front of the council, his hand steady as he made his speech. His voice rang out with confidence, but a touch of uncertainty was barely noticeable. He spoke of peace, unity, and the strength of humanity's values. He spoke of the desire to join the Galactic Council, to stand side by side with the advanced civilizations of the universe, and to contribute to the greater good of the galaxy. As he finished his speech, a quiet murmur spread among the council members. There was a feeling of anticipation in the room, and then the chair of the council, a towering alien known as Marduk, spoke. "You speak of peace, human," Marduk's voice echoed across the hall. "But your species is not yet ready. You are chaotic, unpredictable. Your history is filled with wars, violence, and division. We cannot allow you a seat at the table." The words hit like a heavy blow. Howell's eyes widened in disbelief. This was not what he had expected. I understand your concerns," Howell said, trying to keep his voice steady. "But we have learned from our past. We have evolved. We have the capacity to contribute, to help guide the galaxy toward peace. We deserve a chance." Marduk's eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on Howell. "You fail to understand, human. The Galactic Council does not make room for those who have not proven themselves. You are not ready." The words seemed final, and before Howell could respond, the council members nodded in agreement. One by one, they gave their silent consent. The decision was made. The rejection was final. The chamber seemed to close in around Howell. He could feel the weight of the council's dismissal, the judgment from beings who had seen countless civilizations rise and fall. But he knew one thing for sure: humanity was not like the others. A voice broke through his thoughts, soft but stern. "The decision is made. Your species will not be joining the Galactic Council. You have been rejected." Howell stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing. How could this be happening? They had come all this way, only to be turned away like this. His heart sank. He turned to face the doors of the council chamber, his thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. The disappointment was overwhelming, but something else stirred within him, a sense of defiance. He wasn't going to leave without saying something. With a calm but firm voice, Howell spoke one last time. "You may think we are not ready, but Earth will not wait forever. We will rise. And when we do, you will wish you had given us a seat at the table." For a moment, there was a hushed silence. The council members exchanged glances, but none spoke. Howell turned on his heel and walked out of the chamber, his resolve hardening with every step. As he made his way back to his ship, the thoughts of rejection swirled in his mind. But there was something else, something deep inside him, a growing understanding. The council had made a mistake, a grave one. Earth wasn't just another weak species to be brushed aside. Once back aboard his ship, Howell stood at the helm, staring out at the stars. The world he had just left behind seemed so small, so distant. But he knew one thing: the galaxy hadn't seen anything yet. The moment the ship jumped into hyperspace, the message was sent. The message was simple, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 years of human history. Run. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. They had rejected humanity, but they hadn't realized the consequences of doing so. The humans would not be ignored. They would not be dismissed. Earth had one message for the galaxy: Prepare yourselves. The vast expanse of space stretched out before Ambassador Howell as he stood on the bridge of his ship, staring out into the endless darkness. His mind was racing. He had just witnessed the rejection of humanity, a moment that would forever change the fate of his species. But there was something else, something more pressing now. The decision had been made, and humanity would have to make a choice. As the ship sailed through the stars, Howell's mind turned to the message he had sent to the Galactic Council. It was a simple message, but one that carried the full weight of humanity's defiance. Run. The Council had no idea what that meant. They thought they were in control. They thought humanity was weak, unworthy of being in their presence. But Howell knew something they didn't. Earth had secrets. Humanity had hidden strengths, a fire that could not be easily snuffed out. And now, it was time for the galaxy to understand just how wrong they were. "How much time do we have?" Howell asked, his voice steady as he turned to the ship's communications officer. "Just a few minutes, sir," the officer replied, his fingers flying over the console. "The message has been sent to every corner of the galaxy. The response should come soon." Howell nodded, his thoughts still fixed on what had just transpired. The Galactic Council had been blind to the potential of humanity. They thought their advanced technology, their centuries of peace and unity, gave them the right to decide the fate of all other species. But they hadn't reckoned with Earth. As the minutes ticked by, Howell couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was about to learn a lesson it wouldn't soon forget. He had always known that humanity was special, but now he understood just how much they were capable of. The comm screen blinked to life. A message from the Council. Howell's heart skipped a beat. The Council had heard his warning. But what would they say? What would they do now? He opened the message, but it wasn't from the Galactic Council itself. Instead, it was a single, harshly delivered line. "You are making a grave mistake." The message sent a chill down Howell's spine. There was no mistaking the tone. It wasn't just a warning. It was a threat. The galaxy was already starting to react to the message. The Council might have dismissed humanity, but the implications of the warning were far-reaching. Suddenly, the ship's alarms blared to life, breaking Howell from his thoughts. "Sir, we're picking up massive energy signatures," one of the officers shouted. "It's coming from several directions." Howell's eyes narrowed. His first instinct was to reach for the controls, but he stopped. This wasn't just any energy reading. This was something bigger, something the Council had prepared for. "What's happening?" Howell asked urgently. "It looks like an armada, sir. A fleet, heading towards Earth." The officer's words made Howell's heart race. The Council's response was already in motion. They were going to retaliate. They believed they could just crush humanity with their superior forces. But they were wrong. They had no idea who they were dealing with. "Set course for Earth," Howell ordered, his voice firm and unwavering. "We're going to show them why they should have listened." The crew of the ship worked quickly, adjusting the coordinates. As they moved at full speed towards Earth, Howell couldn't help but wonder just how much the galaxy underestimated his species. They thought humanity was weak, that their strength lay only in their ability to survive. But they were wrong. Humanity had something far more dangerous than raw power. They had the will to fight, the drive to overcome impossible odds. The Council had no idea how far humanity was willing to go to protect their home. As the ship hurtled toward Earth, Howell took a deep breath. This was only the beginning. The galaxy might have turned its back on humanity, but Earth was ready to show them what it truly meant to face the wrath of humans. The cold void of space had always been vast and silent, but now it felt different. There was an unmistakable weight to it as Ambassador Howell's ship sliced through the dark expanse, its engines roaring as it raced toward Earth. The air on board was thick with tension, every crew member silent, their eyes fixed on the screens in front of them. Howell stood at the front of the bridge, staring at the vastness of space. His thoughts were focused, his mind racing with the implications of what was happening. They had sent the warning, but now The stakes had been raised. The Council was on their way, and they had sent a fleet to deal with humanity. "Sir," the communications officer's voice broke through his thoughts. "We're picking up additional signals. The fleet's moving faster than expected." Howell's eyes narrowed as he turned toward the officer. "How long until they reach Earth?" "At their current speed, just under 3 days," the officer replied. "They'll be there before we can warn anyone." It was too fast. The fleet was closing in on Earth, and the Council wasn't going to waste time. Their mission was clear: eliminate the threat, crush humanity's pride, and send a message to anyone else who thought they could defy the Galactic Council. But Howell wasn't going to give up. Not now. He had to find a way to make sure Earth stood its ground. The Council had underestimated them once, but it was clear they wouldn't make that mistake again. "Send a message to Earth," Howell ordered, his voice firm. "Tell them to prepare for anything. We need to buy them as much time as possible." The communications officer quickly worked at the console, sending the encrypted message to Earth. Howell could only hope it would be received in time. There was no room for mistakes now. He turned back to the view outside the ship, seeing the stars streaking by as they moved closer to their home planet. They had little time, and the threat was growing closer by the minute. He could almost feel the pressure of the Council's fleet bearing down on Earth. Every second counted. "Sir, we're nearing the outer rim of the system," one of the officers said, breaking his thoughts. "The Council fleet is closing in fast." Howell's heart pounded in his chest. He had no idea what the Council would do when they arrived, but he knew that humanity had to stand its ground. They could not let their home planet fall without a fight. They had to show the galaxy that Earth was not a weak target to be conquered. "How long until Earth is within range?" Howell asked, his voice steady despite the tension that gripped him. "1 hour, sir," the officer replied. "But we're already picking up their fleet on our sensors. They'll be in firing range long before we can get to Earth." "How much time do we have before we lose contact?" Howell pressed. "Less than 30 minutes, the officer said. "After that, we'll be in the heart of their fleet's weapons range." The pressure was mounting. The crew was working quickly to keep the ship moving at top speed, but they all knew that time was running out. Howell's thoughts raced as he considered his options. The Council had made their move, but what if there was something they didn't know? What if humanity had something in reserve, something the galaxy had never seen before? "Howell," a voice interrupted his thoughts, one of the tactical officers. "We've just detected a signal. It's coming from Earth." Howell's heart skipped a beat. A signal from Earth. They weren't supposed to be able to communicate so quickly. "Open the transmission," Howell ordered, his voice tinged with hope. The screen flickered to life, and the face of a military leader appeared on the screen. It was General Ramiro, one of the highest-ranking officials on Earth, a man Howell trusted. "Ambassador Howell." General Ramiro's voice was calm, but the tension in his eyes was clear. "We've received your message. We're preparing. If the Council's fleet is nearly on top of us, they'll hit Earth within the next few hours." Howell's mind raced. There was no time for Earth to prepare the full might of their defenses. They needed something fast, something powerful. "General," Howell said urgently, "activate Project Dawn." The general's face was unreadable. "Are you sure, Ambassador?" "Howell," the general began, his voice shaking slightly. "Project Dawn was meant to be a last resort. It was never meant to be used unless we were at the brink of destruction." "I know," Howell replied, his voice firm. "But this is the brink." The message ended abruptly, and Howell turned to his officers, determination in his eyes. The battle was about to begin, but Earth wasn't going to go down without a fight. The Council thought they were unstoppable. They thought humanity was weak, but they were about to learn how wrong they were. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Howell ordered. "We're going to make sure they know we're not backing down." The crew nodded, and the ship's engines roared louder as they pushed forward, ready for whatever came next. Humanity's stand was just beginning, and the galaxy had no idea what it was about to face. The tension on board the ship was palpable. Ambassador Howell stood at the front of the bridge, eyes fixed on the vast, dark expanse of space. The ship was moving at full speed toward Earth, but the Council's fleet wasn't far behind. The countdown had begun, and every second that passed felt like an eternity. "Sir, Earth is less than 15 minutes away," the communications officer called out, her voice tight with urgency. "But the Council fleet has already begun to move into position. We'll be in their firing range in less than 10. Howell's mind raced. The Council was swift, efficient, and ruthless. They had no intention of waiting for the humans to make their next move. If they didn't act soon, Earth could be lost before they even had a chance to fight back. "How long until Project Dawn is ready?" Howell asked, turning to the tactical officer. "Project Dawn is primed," the officer replied. "But it's a risk. We don't know if it will work." Howell's eyes narrowed. He understood the officer's concern. Project Dawn had been designed as a last resort weapon, a desperate attempt to turn the tide of battle in humanity's favor. The weapon had never been tested in real combat. No one knew if it would work, but Howell didn't have the luxury of hesitation. If they didn't use it, humanity might not survive this fight. "We don't have a choice," Howell said, his voice cold and determined. "Activate it. Now." The officer nodded and began typing commands into the console. Howell could feel the ship's engines vibrate under his feet as they pushed forward, racing toward Earth. The pressure in the room was unbearable. The crew worked in complete silence, knowing that their actions in the next few minutes could mean the difference between survival and annihilation. "Sir, we're entering Earth's orbit," the communications officer reported. "The Council fleet is almost within range. They're preparing to fire." Howell gritted his teeth. The Council would not show mercy. They never did. It was up to humanity to show them what they were capable of. The stakes were higher than ever, and the moment of truth was almost here. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Howell ordered, his voice steady despite the rising tension. "We need to buy Earth as much time as possible." The crew sprang into action, making adjustments to the ship's course as they prepared to face the incoming threat. Howell's heart raced as he watched the monitors. He could see the Council's fleet moving into position, their massive ships casting long shadows across the vastness of space. They were closing in, and they wouldn't stop until Earth had been crushed under their might. And then, just as the Council's fleet locked into their firing positions, Howell heard the faintest hum. It started low, barely audible, but it grew steadily louder, like the roar of a distant storm. The hum of Project Dawn. "Howell," the officer at the weapons console called out. "It's working. The energy levels are rising. We're at 80% power." The tension in the room was unbearable. Every crew member knew the significance of what was about to happen. Project Dawn was humanity's one shot at survival. If it failed, well, there would be no if anymore. The countdown continued. The Earth was within range, but the Council fleet was still moving forward. The weapons were locked. The planet's fate was hanging in the balance. "How much longer?" Howell asked, his voice a low growl of desperation. 10 seconds, the officer responded. "Activate it," Howell ordered. A deep, resonating hum filled the ship, a signal that Project Dawn had been activated. The entire ship seemed to vibrate under the immense power that coursed through it. On the screens, Howell could see the beam charging, energy flowing through the core of the weapon. And then, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. The weapon fired. A blinding flash erupted from the ship, a wave of energy that surged forward like a tidal wave. The light was so intense that it was almost impossible to look at. It tore through the darkness of space, racing toward the Council's fleet with terrifying speed. The Council's ships didn't see it coming. They never had a chance. The first ship in the fleet exploded in an instant, its massive form disintegrating in a flash of light. The energy surged through the entire fleet, blasting through their shields like they were nothing. The ships tried to maneuver, to escape the overwhelming power of Project Dawn, But it was too late. The weapon's energy ripped through them one by one, disintegrating entire fleets in seconds. Howell stood there, watching the destruction unfold. He felt a surge of triumph, but there was no time to savor it. The battle was far from over. The first wave of the Council's fleet was gone, but there was more to come. And now that humanity had shown its power, there was no going back. "Sir," the officer called, her voice shaking with awe. "We've destroyed their fleet. The remaining ships are retreating." For a moment, everything was silent. The sound of the engines, the hum of the ship, all of it seemed to fade away. Howell stood still, watching as the remnants of the Council's fleet drifted in the void of space, a testament to humanity's strength. But even as the enemy retreated, Howell knew one thing. This was only the beginning. The Council would not let this defeat slide. They would return, and when they did, humanity would be ready. The countdown was over. The war had begun. The silence in the command room was deafening. The vibrations from Project Dawn's final shot still resonated through the ship's hull, but it was over. The sound of human voices, though quiet, began to fill the room. The crew had done the impossible. They had decimated the Galactic Council's fleet, and for the first time in centuries, Earth was not only safe, but it had also demonstrated its power to the rest of the galaxy. Ambassador Howell stood at the front of the command bridge, eyes focused on the view of the stars outside. His mind was racing. The battle was over, for now, but he knew that they weren't out of danger. The Galactic Council was not a force to be taken lightly, and this victory, while monumental, was only the beginning of what might be an even larger war. "How much time until we can move the fleet to Earth?" Howell asked, his voice firm but tinged with exhaustion. The communications officer looked up from her console, eyes wide with shock. "Sir, the remaining Council fleet, they're retreating into hyperspace. They've sent a distress signal. But it's clear, we've destroyed their forward fleet. There's no immediate threat." "How long before they regroup?" Howell pressed. The last thing he wanted was for them to be caught off guard. The tactical officer quickly ran the calculations. "It'll take them a few weeks at the earliest to reassemble a fleet large enough to counter us. However, their response will depend on how fast they can recover their damaged ships." Howell nodded grimly. The Council might be temporarily defeated, but they wouldn't just roll over. They'd return, more prepared than before, and humanity had to be ready for what came next. The crew went back to their stations, their movements a little slower now that the adrenaline of the battle had passed. Howell's thoughts lingered on Earth. The planet's fate had been spared, but for how long? The Galactic Council had never allowed an uprising from a species like humanity before. It would be interesting to see how they reacted to this new challenge. "We need to send a message to Earth," Howell said, more to himself than to anyone in particular. "The victory is ours, but Earth must be prepared for the next phase." The communications officer nodded. "I'll send the message immediately, Ambassador." "Howell." A voice interrupted his thoughts. He turned to see the ship's chief engineer, a gruff woman with short cropped hair, approaching him with an urgent look on her face. "We've got a problem. The energy systems used for Project Dawn. They're severely drained. It'll take us some time to recharge." Howell's heart sank. Project Dawn was humanity's trump card, their last-ditch weapon. If it was rendered useless now, they would be vulnerable. "Explain," Howell demanded. "We need the power from our remaining generators to maintain basic systems for the time being. The weapon's energy reserves are in critical condition," the engineer replied. "It could take weeks to recharge it fully. If the Council were to attack again before then..." Howell's mind raced. If the Galactic Council returned with even a fraction of the force they had originally brought, humanity would be exposed. They couldn't afford to lose their only advantage. "How long until we're fully operational?" he asked. "At least a month," the engineer said reluctantly. "Maybe less if we can get additional power from nearby systems, but I wouldn't count on it." Howell stood there for a long moment, considering their options. The victory they had won was significant, but it was only temporary. They had no guarantee that the Council wouldn't send reinforcements, and if that happened, Earth would be exposed. He needed to think fast. "Can we send a distress signal to Earth?" Howell asked. "Tell them to prepare for potential retaliation." "We can do that," the communications officer said, "but it would have to be quick. We don't want to broadcast too much. The Council might be monitoring." Howell weighed the risk. A warning to Earth could give them time to prepare, but broadcasting it might also alert the Council to humanity's limited capabilities. It was a fine line to walk, and Howell wasn't sure which direction to take. Every decision had consequences. "Send the warning," Howell decided finally, "but keep it brief. Make sure they understand the danger, but don't give them any advantage." As the communications officer set to work, Howell walked to the observation window. Outside, the remnants of the Council's fleet drifted in space, lifeless and broken. It was a humbling sight. For the first time, humanity had shown the galaxy that it would no longer be pushed around. But that victory came at a high price. Humans might have won this battle, Howell muttered to himself. But the war is far from over. The message was sent, but Howell couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty that clung to him. The communications officer had made it brief and coded, but he knew the Galactic Council would be monitoring human frequencies. They had to be careful. "Any word from Earth?" Howell asked, his voice tinged with impatience as he stepped back onto the command bridge. The officer looked up from the monitor, her face tense. "We've received a few acknowledgement signals, but nothing significant. Earth is already mobilizing defenses, but they won't be able to react quickly enough if the Council decides to come back with full force." Howell clenched his jaw. The Council was known for its pride and arrogance, and they wouldn't take kindly to this kind of defeat. It would only be a matter of time before they struck again. He had no doubt that they were already making plans to regroup, and the next encounter would be far more dangerous than the last. "What about our fleet? How are we holding up?" Howell asked, moving toward the tactical officer's station. The fleet had sustained significant damage during the battle. Even with their victory, there were still repairs to be made. The tactical officer glanced at the status screens. "Our ships are functional, but we're operating with reduced efficiency. The damage to Project Dawn was severe, and we've been redirecting energy from the other systems to keep vital functions running. The crew is fatigued. We need more time to recover." Howell sighed, running a hand through his hair. "We don't have that time. The Galactic Council won't wait for us to fix ourselves. We need to be ready for whatever comes next. Can we count on our allies?" The officer hesitated before replying. "Some of the smaller factions have sent reinforcements, but they're not enough. They don't have the firepower we need to push back an entire fleet." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the weight of the situation. It was clear that humanity had no choice but to stand alone. For the first time in history, Earth had proven itself a formidable force in the galaxy. But that meant making enemies. Powerful enemies. The Galactic Council would surely be back, and this time they wouldn't underestimate humanity's will to fight. "How long do we have before we need to make a decision?" Howell asked. The tactical officer looked at his screen. "We have a few weeks at best. After that, they'll have regrouped, and we'll need to either find a way to defend ourselves or strike first." Howell nodded grimly. Time was slipping away. The humans had won one battle, but that was only a small part of the larger war. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. "Gather the command staff," Howell ordered. "We need to prepare for the worst." Hours later, the command staff gathered in the war room. The flickering lights above them cast long shadows across the room, emphasizing the sense of urgency. The mood was somber, the reality of what was coming settling over them, all like a storm cloud. Howell stood at the head of the table, addressing his officers. "We've done the impossible. We've struck the Galactic Council where they least expected it, but this is just the beginning. The Council will regroup, and they will come back stronger than before. We need to be ready." One of the senior officers, Commander Jenkins, stood up. "We know they'll return with more firepower. Our advantage was Project Dawn, but as it stands, it's out of commission. We're not going to be able to replicate that anytime soon. We need a new strategy." Howell nodded. "You're right, Jenkins. Our resources are limited, but we've shown the galaxy that humans are not to be underestimated. The Council will take us seriously now, and we need to capitalize on that. We can't rely on one weapon. We need to develop new strategies, build alliances, and fight smarter. Every piece of intelligence we can gather is crucial." Another officer, Lieutenant Vargas, spoke up, his voice urgent. "We also need to prepare for retaliation on Earth. The Council won't just target us here. They'll strike at the heart of humanity, our home planet. We need to reinforce Earth's defenses, and fast." Howell's expression hardened. "Earth has already been warned, but you're right. We can't leave it vulnerable. We'll deploy the remaining fleet to the homeworld and fortify the defenses. At the same time, we'll send reconnaissance ships to scout for the Council's movements. We need to know where they are and what they're planning." The room fell into deep thought as they considered the implications of Howell's words. The future was uncertain, and the stakes had never been higher. But one thing was clear: Earth had shown the galaxy that it could fight back. Now, humanity had to prove it could win. "We'll need to be strategic," Howell continued. "We can't afford a direct confrontation just yet. We need to gather intelligence, build alliances, and strengthen our position. When the Council returns, we'll be ready. We will not be caught off guard again." As the officers around the table began to discuss their next moves, Howell stood in the center of the room, his mind racing. They had won one battle, but the war was far from over. The Galactic Council had been humiliated, and they wouldn't take that lightly. Howell knew it was only a matter of time before the next strike came, but he was determined to ensure that humanity would be ready. The countdown to the next great conflict had begun. The days blurred together, a relentless march toward the inevitable. On Earth, humanity fortified its defenses as if preparing for an all-out war. Cities were transformed into military strongholds. Munitions factories churned out weapons at an unprecedented rate. Every able-bodied citizen, from the youngest recruit to the seasoned veterans, trained day and night. They would be ready. There was no choice but to be. Back on the flagship, Admiral Howell stood before the large tactical display. The room was filled with officers, scientists, and strategists. They had worked tirelessly to come up with a plan, and now they had no more time. The Galactic Council was coming, and humanity had to be ready to strike back. "We've analyzed their movements," said Lieutenant Vargas, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of tension. He gestured to the holographic map of the galaxy, showing the movements of the Council fleet. "We know they're assembling. The first wave will likely reach Earth in the next 10 days. Howell nodded, his expression grim. "What do we know about their strategy? Are they going to try to crush Earth first, or will they target us here?" The officer in charge of intelligence, Commander Jenkins, stepped forward. "From the data we've gathered, we expect them to come with overwhelming force. They'll want to break our will quickly and decisively. But the good news is we've learned more about their tactics. The Council relies heavily on centralized command. If we can disrupt that, we can level the playing field." "We've already seen the power of their fleets," Howell said, tapping his fingers on the table. "We can't win a straight-up fight, but if we can find their weaknesses, we stand a chance." Commander Jenkins looked at Howell with a knowing gaze. "We've already identified several potential weak spots. Their fleet relies on a central command hub, and their communication systems are vulnerable to disruption. If we can hit them with a surprise attack on their flagship, it could throw their entire fleet into chaos." There was a long pause as the room absorbed this information. The idea of targeting the flagship, the heart of the Council's fleet, was audacious, but it was also humanity's best chance for survival. If they could dismantle the Council's command structure, They might stand a chance against the larger force that was on its way. Howell's voice cut through the silence. This will be our one shot. We can't afford a prolonged war. We need to hit them hard, fast, and leave no room for retaliation. Our best assets will be the stealth ships. We'll sneak into their territory, launch the attack on their flagship, and disrupt their operations. At the same time, Earth's defenses will hold the line. The officers exchanged uncertain glances. It was a bold plan, and there was no guarantee it would work. But it was their best option. How long until we can be ready? Howell asked. We're ready now, said Lieutenant Vargas. We've completed the final upgrades to our stealth fleet. We've integrated the new technology and are prepared to move out on your command. Howell stood tall, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. The entire fate of humanity hung in the balance. They were about to take a risk that could either secure their future or seal their doom. But there was no turning back now. Then we move out, Howell said firmly. Tell Earth to prepare. This is our final stand. Days later, as the first wave of Council ships approached Earth, the stealth fleet slipped into the darkness of space. Their ships, invisible to the enemy sensors, moved like shadows, barely a whisper in the vastness of the cosmos. The fleet was small, but it was swift and deadly. Howell's strategy was simple: infiltrate the heart of the Council's fleet, strike their flagship, and sow chaos. It was their only hope. The tension was palpable. Crew members worked in near silence, their eyes trained on their monitors, hands steady on their controls. No one spoke, but everyone knew what was at stake. As the fleet neared its destination, the first signs of enemy ships appeared on the horizon. The Galactic Council fleet had arrived, vast and imposing. Their ships were massive, their weapons ready to strike. But they were unaware of the humans lurking in the shadows, preparing to deliver a devastating blow. Admiral Howell stood at the helm of his flagship, staring out into the darkness. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind remained clear. The Council would never know what hit them. Stealth mode engaged, came the soft voice of the sensor officer. Howell nodded, ready to engage. Let's show them why they should never have underestimated humanity. The first strike was swift and brutal. The stealth ships emerged from the darkness, their weapons tearing through the Council flagship's defenses before they even knew what was happening. The crew of the flagship scrambled to respond, but it was too late. The humans were already inside their command center, causing chaos and confusion. On Earth, the battle was just as fierce. The defense fleets held their ground, fighting valiantly against the incoming Council ships. The skies were filled with explosions as humanity fought for survival. Admiral Howell watched from his ship as the first signs of victory began to unfold. The Council flagship was in flames, its central command obliterated. The Council's fleet was scattered, their once pristine order now in chaos. Humanity had dealt a crushing blow. But Howell knew that this was only the beginning. The Council wouldn't give up easily. Their pride and arrogance would fuel their revenge. The war was far from over, but humanity had sent a message. We will not go down without a fight. As the final waves of Council ships retreated into the darkness, Howell allowed himself a small moment of relief. Humanity had survived. They had fought back, and the galaxy would never forget the day they learned that humans could be a force to be reckoned with. The war was far from over, but humanity had won the first battle.